Alright, so first to start, there need to be some guidelines, let's say. We could call them rules if we really want to, if we're not going to get too triggered by that word, but some parameters or boundaries for a conversation to occur, because a conversation is intended to be, and only useful when it's an exchange of ideas, an interaction together. It's implying two sides coming together to exchange perspectives. And that it's not an exchange then when people are attacking each other and they're talking at each other or to each other technically. Instead, we want to both be listening and talking. And so anyways, to have a worthwhile discussion or convo about something that's actually going to, actually result in any form of progress instead of just fighting. So, in order to prevent attacking and getting personal and fighting, we need the rules to make it a safe game, a safe combo, and hopefully a concise one. So the standard ones, in my opinion, are everything everyone's saying is obviously only from their own perspective, of their own experiences. So no one's able to tell the other person what their own experiences are, what the other's experiences are. They can only speak from their own perspective. You can set a clear time restraint ahead of time if there are any deadlines or how much time is available. So, in case it's a large chunk of info, there doesn't need to be a focus on time. We really want to remove focus from time or deadline or ticking down and the nervousness and tension or anxiety that builds up when the focus is there. Also, because the best moments and experiences usually are during moments of timelessness. What's the last one? What's the last one? It's written down right here. The last one is that each person has the option to and suggestion to set up a clear word or phrase that they can use when they feel offended. The point is for each person to express when they feel offended. When they feel offended, as in the conversation has switched into a personal arena regarding attacks and fighting and igniting that type of angle for the convo. So this empowers each person to be able to use the word, because use of each of those words will immediately stop the convo. It'll pause the convo, and the people will have to start talking about that person's feelings of being offended to resolve them. Understanding that communication can resolve virtually anything. So understanding also even deeper than that, like 80% plus. That's just a made-up number, but the vast majority of fights, arguments, disagreements even, are actually just misunderstandings. It's always better to define instead of try to interpret. Interpreting the other person is where you get all these misunderstandings. That's where they all lie. And so instead, ask the other person to clarify the definition of what they actually said. No need to translate it or interpret it into your language. If you're the one listening, then listen to what they say. The person listening needs to come over into the person speaking's world and learn their language. Really just to be the most efficient. Okay, so speaking of language, that's the next step. Actually, that's the third step. So the next step actually is to confirm that you have an openness to quality of life improving, or an openness to progress. Like, for example, in convo, or as said earlier, a convo should be an exchange of ideas and interaction together. And so how can we know if people are even open to that? There needs to be that sense of openness. And here's how. Asking the question, would you rather be accurate as you can, as accurate as you can, or be right. So basically, once everyone involved in the convo would rather be as accurate as they can, that's the indication that they've opened up to progress, no matter where it's heading. It's actually going to be a worthwhile convo of spending time and energy on. And then lastly, for these prerequisites to even enter a worthwhile convo, to make a worthwhile convo, the last prerequisite is the whole subject of language. Like I was saying earlier, they need to be understanding the same language, and the English language specifically has tons of little pitfalls and traps and different contexts, and it's a conglomeration from so many diverse cultures and dynamic uses, depending on the context and everything. So it's really tricky. It's not straightforward. There are some common, like almost FAQ words that are worthwhile defining first, which I've actually done in the book. Don't need to say them here, but like love, acceptance, romance, peace, grief, understanding grief versus sadness, and happiness, etc. listed in the Hardmode house. So if everyone has a clear understanding of those definitions, then they don't need to really get wishy-washy while they're talking about it in a convo. Bam, we can move on into understanding and explaining the situation that we're even dealing with, the premise that we're even speaking from. Now that we've entered and agreed to, we're gonna have a worthwhile convo, let's explain that premise of reality from which we're even speaking of. Couple things here. First is to observe and accept the transient nature of experiences, to observe that things are changeable. You can do this by asking or answering, what is something not changing? Find something that's not moving, not changing. And yeah, all experiences are changing. The only thing that isn't is our conscious thoughts, actions, and decisions. So that kind of helps differentiate even further the experiences that we're exchanging in a convo from our actual selves, which would be our consciousness, our conscious thoughts, decisions, and actions, and what to do about it. So there's a clear separation, which really helps smooth things out and learn and grow and improve and progress. But it also helps malleable. It helps make and see everything as more malleable. So when you're discussing, you're not really discussing your beliefs versus their beliefs. You're just discussing beliefs, and we have our proclivities or our tendencies, but we're a little more open-minded, which is the whole fucking point of a convo. So after that, observing the transient nature of things. The next one is to answer the question of what are you? Well, so because we're having a convo, for example, so what are we? What am I and what are you? And the previous, that leads right into this what are you question, which is, like I said earlier, you end up being your actual conscious thoughts, actions, and decisions. Since that's the only thing that we can control ourselves, why would we label ourselves as anything else? Like, yeah, to an extent we are our job or our looks or our culture, etc., but we didn't. A lot of those things are not, well, all of those things are not, well, let's just say a majority of those things are not our fault, and then we don't even have control over a lot of other ones. So it's not really it's really, most fundamentally, we are our conscious thoughts, decisions, and actions. So we have an understanding of what we are. Then lastly, to understand the premise from which we're talking about, there's a neutral understanding and observation of how all experiences are connected together. This is a practice in holistic thinking. First of all, you can do a quiz here by saying or asking, like, identify, say, something out of its environment, and then define that thing without using its environment to define it. Define the thing without including anything else surrounding the thing you're defining. So yeah, because to really define something, you have to imply the opposite of the thing. You can't have light without the existence of darkness, for example. And vice versa. So these experiences, while they are separate from a certain specific lens, well, obviously white is not black and black is not white, they're separate, but they are, or let's say they're different, but they are interconnected. So they're reliant on each other for their own existence. And in that sense, from that lens, they really are one and the same thing from that lens, as they and all of our experiences are actually all interconnected. The things we do actually do ripple out in all directions eternally as well, and have an effect on everything. So really exercising and practicing that holistic viewpoint. Next, once we have a neutral understanding of just this scientific observational based interconnectedness of all of our experiences, we can differentiate between ourselves and the experiences. So I like to use the word worth, because there's a lot of different ways something can be worth something, like context. The most important one is to differentiate our inherent worth, what I call our inherent worth, which is let's say for example, I'm a minority and so I'm worth less, is the statement. Let's assume that statement and say, well, the minority bit is an experience, because you can only break that down. Minorities, say some traditionally a dark-skinned person in a majority white-skinned culture, that you can't have either of those colors without them being interconnected together. And so the black makes the white, or the dark makes the light, and the light makes the dark. But these are experiences. These are not inherent worth. So inherent worth would be more connected with what we were differentiating earlier, with our conscious thoughts, actions, and decisions. Our actual consciousness versus our experience. The artist versus the art. So that's not really a good, the color thing, race thing is not really a good example. A better example is someone being worth more or less in a workplace environment. So two people, let's say we have two people, one is more qualified and skilled for the exact job, and the other person is less qualified and skilled for the exact job. So the person who's more skilled is worth more. They are worth more. But they are made up of experience, they're human experiences, their experiences are all interconnected. Technically, they are relying on each other for their own existence. Their experiences really are all interconnected as one. So from the lens of being one, all connected as one, what's inherently worth more? Well, you can't have more or less, because they're actually the same thing. They're one and the same, they're one. So you can't judge one from this lens without judging the other, really, because it's actually just, you can't judge one piece without judging the whole thing. There's only the whole thing. Okay, so from that lens of inherent worth, they are equal. Even though at the same time, from the specific lens of being more valuable or skilled for the job, the one person is worth more and one person is worth less. It's really important not to conflate a huge number of issues. A huge majority of issues come from conflating these two contexts, from seeing something through Well, conflating the perception of like our experiences through just a experiential lens, like the being more or less skilled at a job, and conflating that with our perspective of our own inherent worth. Okay, and that's pretty easily said. It's like, if you suck at something, it doesn't mean you suck as a person. It means you suck at that thing, at that skill. It doesn't mean you inherently are bad or broken and all that stuff. Very important, because it's very easy to conflate the two. And in most cases, you can just learn and grow those skills, by the way. But your inherent worth is, as far as your consciousness, that's always available. It's just always available. So, and there's no reason why anyone is worth more or less inherently in their own consciousness. So yeah, we're always equal inherently. Even though we're really not worth equal. We're not equally worth in a lot of other lenses, contexts. The ones that are like fleeting and don't matter as much. Okay, so we've discussed different lenses from which to see and to perceive the same things, the same experiences, I mean. Lastly, to point out, to close up this chapter, is to just explain that one of these, there's no lens of these that is like more important than the other, as in like we shouldn't not use any of these lenses. We shouldn't kick out the lenses, because the inherent worth lens, the lens through which we see our inherent worth, obviously is probably the most important. Actually, it is vital and crucial to our actual peace and like ability to connect based on love and everything, and feel such great human experiences. But just because it's vital, it doesn't mean the other ones are not important, because at the same time, if we can't be hiring less skilled people for jobs that we need more skilled people on, you know what I mean? When there are more, we need to, it's going to be a better life for everyone if we are efficient. And that means keep a free, competitive market and let the winners be the winners and the losers be the losers. Just don't play in the game of inherent worth. The game is only out here in the world, the physical world, the experiential world. So no lens is worth ignoring. Every lens is important in its own context for its own purpose. What's really important then is, to wrap this chapter up, is the ability to see the lens, the ability to differentiate between which lens you're perceiving your experience from. Like I mentioned before, the last thing to just really emphasize again is it's important. The ability to see the lens you're viewing from is important, because you don't want to conflate different lenses. You don't want to mix different lenses and see something as, oh, just because I'm more or less worth or more or less valuable in this, through this lens, like race, gender, money, status, all the worldly things. You don't want to conflate that with your worth and value inherently as a being of consciousness. That's where shit goes bad. All right, great. So that ends up with a clear understanding and explanation of the premise of reality that we're coming from. Next, we need to actually identify, really get a firm grasp on, at this point, of the issue, if there is one, which there's probably an issue. Good, that's a good bet. So let's identify the issue. Let's see here. Okay, and this could be anything really, like any variation of conflating the two lenses, or conflate not the two lenses, but conflating any of the lenses, not even just two, but conflating multiple of more than two of them, more or less here or there. There's so many ways that people can fuck this up and see this, and get it all mixed up. So we really want to just exactly understand, how are we seeing this? How are we not seeing this clearly? All right, and then we can move on to the solution. Solution, it's important to note that there are two, at a most fundamental level, perspective here, in which to approach the issue. There are two fundamental approaches, very different, very important to differentiate between. And I call them, one, the scientific approach, and the other well, I'll start with the other one, sorry. One would be the closed-minded, like subjective and closed-minded approach. The other would be the scientific approach. The scientific approach is still a little bit subjective, but we'll talk about that. More importantly, it's open-minded through the process of science, scientific method in approaching the issue. Okay, so let's start with the first solution, which is the first approach to solve the issue would be from a subjective standpoint, and a closed-minded one. Closed-minded to better alternatives or better options. So there's really a lot to say here. I'll try to make this part brief for this this video I'm taking, but the way I have it written right here is, this is narcissistically and egotistically disconnecting ourselves from the puzzle, the interconnected puzzle of everything. I like to picture all of the experiences that are interconnected as one, which we can each see those experiences as separate, or different rather, because they are different, but at the same time they're not separate, they're interconnected. So it's just like a puzzle. A puzzle has a bunch of different pieces that connect together to make one solid worldview or one solid picture. And so the first approach is narcissistically and egotistically disconnecting ourselves from the puzzle, our own piece. Like every person is their own piece of the puzzle together. And like in any community, we want the pieces to come together to create a grander picture, something bigger and greater than themselves. And that really gives a sense of connection, belonging, and all these great experiences. They're just wonderful qualities of life. So this first approach actually is the act of disconnecting ourselves from the puzzle, though. And what I mean by that is when we believe or perceive ourselves as inherently worth more or less than other experiences. So like, let's say I look at myself in my surrounding environment, and I say, this is my puzzle piece. This puzzle piece I'm looking at is worth more than the other pieces, or worth less, inherently. So it sounds kind of appealing to view yourself as more special than everyone else, but that actually disconnects yourself from the puzzle to do so. And a huge underlying premise I should mention at some better point during this, is that from my understanding, the most fundamental motivation and satisfying thing in life, experience in life, is a sense of connection and belonging, which is really equatable to, or synonymous to, love. Love described or defined, which we would have done initially, yeah, that's what we would have done it during the definitions time. I was explaining during the prerequisites. But love, to define it real quick, is the connection through the use of empathy, and it's a sense of connection. So, not to be confused with happiness, and not to be confused with peace, even more specifically, but just a sense of empathic connection. And viewing yourself as inherently more or less special or worthwhile than other experiences is in fact disconnecting yourself from the puzzle. So no wonder then we feel isolated, and even if, there's that common saying I like to reference here where that goes, it gets lonely at the top or something like that, because it does. So you're isolated, and of course disconnecting yourself below as inherently worth less than everything else is, you know, a shit show, because you're disconnected and you probably are like suffering a lot. You know, you don't get all the buzzy Las Vegas style feelings of just you know, power and high over boosted narcissistic self-esteem that can at least keep you buzzed from how terribly isolated and disconnected you feel on the underneath. So neither of those options are good, to disconnect yourself from the puzzle upward or downward. But in doing so, either way, this means you have something to view as a false idol in justifying why you're more or less inherently special than everything else. Typically it's just important to note that when people disconnect themselves from the puzzle, they have a reason why. They pick out an experience of theirs that they call as theirs, and they justify them being more or less special based on this experience. For example, looks, intelligence, money and possessions, status and career. That's enough. That's a lot right there. But yeah, just the obvious belief that I'm better than you because I look better than you, I'm prettier, or I'm smarter than you, I'm more intelligent, I have this. It's a false idolatry, or basically making a false idol, because those experiences are all fading and fleeting, as experiences do. Remember when we talked about the transient nature of things? Well, these things, such as intelligence and looks and grades and career and money, they're all fleeting, baby. They're all fading. So yes, they're nice and tasty, but they're not reliable or sustainable like the connection of love is. So let's bring it back that there's something that someone is putting up as an idol, but it's a false idol, and it's not going to be a sustainable option. But yeah, doing this makes you dependent then on whatever you view as your idol falsely. So dependent on something outside of your inherent self, such as your intelligence, or just your looks, or just your grades, or this fake perception of yourself. And you're again conflating that with your own inherent self-worth, which is just like love is always available, and the actual genuine connection that we actually crave. So this ends up leaving your inherent worth more like a competition, and a competition, by the way, that the only way to experience that sense of connection that we actually are genuinely craving, the way to experience that, we learn, is by winning the competition. The competition of, oh, I'm the best looking, because I am the idol, or I'm the one with the special gift, or I'm more special than you. But then you have to stay more special because you've based your inherent self-worth on that thing, and that's a hell of a job. First place is a heavy trophy, or the championship, or the trophy, it's always weighs a lot if you attach yourself to it in that way, in this way. So we're finding a lot of negatives about this approach to solving our issue, because now you have to win, and that means to open up the doors of hell even further here, to maintain the continuous validation of that you're winning, or that you do have what you've attached your inherent self-worth to maintain that. This opens the door to the possibility of lying to others and to yourself, blocking out or ignoring, like repressing, any experiences which contradict your belief. Which there are going to be some experiences and probably always, like, find something that you're the absolute best in. Oh, if you can't, then congrats, you're probably like most people. And so instead of observing and accepting those natural, understandable experiences that are in fact better than us, we would choose to oh, well, I'll just block that out and just not even accept that, or I'll just lie to myself and lie to others. It opens the door to cheating, and which is really just lying. So yeah, it's super fucked up. All right, the second solution, the second approach, to solving the issue. This is the scientific approach. Scientific in that it's open-minded to criticism, to any criticism, and it's just based on observation, not on subjective belief. This is worth noting, like I said earlier, scientific premise of reality is a little bit subjective, but that's only because everything has to be a little bit subjective when we're expressing ourselves. So the difference between the scientific perspective is it's in the word scientific. The scientific method is open to criticism, in any criticism. If it can be destroyed by the truth, it should be destroyed by the truth. And the constant highly valuing openness to constantly be refreshing and just ensuring top efficiency, which doesn't that all sound great? So anyways, the scientific approach is observing that you already are connected with the puzzle. Like you mentioned, your experiences already are an interconnected piece of everything. This has yet been disproven. You already are a connected piece of the greater whole, so congrats, you already belong. You already can experience and have that connection that you crave. This leads to all of your experiences inherently being connected as one and inherently being worthwhile. Because remember, once they're all interconnected, it's like Albert Einstein said, either everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle. So, might as well choose everything's a miracle or whatever. So you definitely just can't judge one experience separately than other experiences with this observation. So, therefore, like we said earlier, this means you aren't bad. Like when we talk about your experiences as you experience yourself, you are not bad or broken or isolated or lonely. That connection, again, is eternal. It's free and it's fulfilling. Now, your experiences, like your looks and your intelligence and the approval from others and status and money and career, these experiences still exist, but only from their respective lens, only through their respective lens for their respective purpose, in their place. It's not conflated with the inherent worth. And so, yeah. So I don't know, like that's maybe inspiring to sharpen the experiences and skills, for example, that you want to sharpen, that you value in the world we live in, such as like even if it's looks or intelligence, learning stuff or whatever it is, but you just don't need to. There's not a desperate need anymore, as you already have the connection that we're deeply craving. So you're not going to be dependent on it. You're not going to open up the door to lying in order to keep it, because it's not a competition anymore. These experiences like looks and intelligence and stuff, they're not a competition. It's just a connection. And it's just the experiences themselves become kind of more like art. Ourselves, our inherent selves, being the artist. We already, as the artist, as our inherent selves, we are already connected, and so now we're left with our experiences here. It's just kind of like an artistic expression. So we might as well, while we're free and eternally fulfilled, let's just express the ideals of our dreams. That's could be our purpose here, simply. And that's just the most fucking freeing like perspective, to do anything and to not be afraid of experiences like death. And oh my god, just find an issue with that. Someone find an issue with that, because I can't yet. So yeah, so from this solution, from this approach, we are okay, we're at peace, And that's it. That's it. Really, that last line is epic about being free as the artist to articulate the expression of the life of your dreams, the experience of your dreams, the masterpiece. Tasty. All right, so those were those two approaches to the solution. Obviously, the scientific one sounds probably a lot better. The open-minded one, it does to me. And if you, by the way, if you need more, like, more reasoning, the other one, the subjective one, the subjective and closed-minded one, that is literally the basis that historically a lot of incidents of separation, discrimination, hate, lying, murder, all that shit has been justified. So people have justified those acts based on simply that. It's like, well, why should you be allowed to kill other people? Well, it's because I'm better than them. Or why you should be allowed to have to use a different restroom, or discriminate against women's rights to vote, or picket, right? Name anything. Because I want it to be that way. That's the subjective, that's basing your premise of reality on your own subjective wants and closing your mind to any criticism to it. Yeah, so that's just a terrible, I mean, it's not always bad, but it is, it certainly opens the door to absolute hell. While the scientific approach is just constantly refreshing and making itself more efficient, and it's truthful, it's rooted in, I mean, as truthful as we can get agnostically is just our observations. So that's, yeah, so the scientific solution is it. And I think that pretty much sums it up then. So we have our solution. In order to give us a little power here, a little oomph about choosing that solution and powering through it, it's important to note how powerful we are, which we tend to forget, how powerful our independent choice is. And just to keep this part brief, there's a chapter in the Hardmode House, of course, but the story of Viktor Frankl in the book Man's Search for Meaning, or a lot of other stories detailing experiences in concentration camps, or just absolute horrific stories in, like, the I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but the Gulapo or whatever from the Russian Soviet Union communist camps, and these people's experiences and their discovery that they still have, even in the absolute most worst living experience, they still were able to notice and carry out their own individual freedom, their own individual sovereignty at the individual level of their own conscious choices. So just fucking try to disprove that. Like, no matter what, we have the independent choice to consciously choose what we want. So, yeah, we've conceptualized the solution, but literally it is up to you. Nothing. Try to pick any kind of environment or condition that's going to prevent you from doing it. If other people were able to, kill them, end up getting themselves killed in concentration camps just to make the independent, sovereign choice to stand up for what they believed was humanistic at the moment, and it resulted in their absolute death. Oh my God, it's incredible. Just to fucking stand true to the principles that they still believed in. And the way that did ripple out from the observation of onlookers, and now to me talking about it now. So it's not in vain either, even though it ends in tragic death. It's not in vain. It does just ripple out in all directions. And that will always be an eternal story now too, I mean, as long as we have it. So next thing is we can set a clear plan to efficiently handle this solution. Nice way I like to do the clear plan, to set a real clear plan, is I like to say the phrase, I can do anything if, and just slap the if on at the end. So first of all, that's true that I can't do anything. We can do anything if. You just need to understand what the if is. And so start with the end goal that you want, that you're at least shooting for, and work your way backwards. I want to run a marathon, so I can run a marathon if I do this. I like train like this. And then I can, next step is I can train like this if I buy the right equipment. And I can buy the right equipment if I get a job and make money. And then you keep going back and back and back each step until you land yourself all the way back to right now in the present moment where you're sitting or standing. And the only thing next to do is the first step. Not only are you ready to powerfully start the first step, but you have an exact clear pathway to do all the steps. There's no guesswork and no excuses. It's either you execute the plan, the clear plan, the efficient plan that you've set, or else you accept yourself as a huge wailing pussy who doesn't really actually genuinely want that goal. All right, so clear plan, super powerful. The last thing is to clarify responsibility during this, in order to take ownership for this solution. So it's just important to at least clarify. It's kind of obvious, but it's important to clarify that we're responsible for our own individual thoughts, decisions, and actions, and not other people's. And I mean, we'll definitely have the common experience of other people trying to impose a responsibility onto us for them, like saying that we're responsible for other people, or like corporations are responsible for this and that. It's like, technically there are no rules. Let's just be clear here. There definitely are no rules on the underlying like framework of our society, of our world, and our existence. There's actually no rules, like no laws of physics. There's really only theories that just haven't yet been disproven. So there are consequences, though. So no rules, only consequences. It's important then to not live recklessly and carelessly and irresponsibly for your own contribution to the greater good, as from your own piece of the puzzle. Because if you do that, you will have to suffer also the consequences of that. And so you can take your responsibility or not take your responsibility, but either way you will end up actually dealing with the consequences of what you choose. And so it's best to take a strong ownership then, with a real clear understanding of what is your responsibility here, and how that responsibility is only for your own conscious thoughts, decisions, and actions, which make up your contribution to the total outcome. The outcome that we experience in our lives, our experiences, are not our responsibility. Only our contribution to them is. Hopefully that frees up a lot of mind space, frees up a lot of, you get the point. Really frees us up to focus all of our energy on only our own responsibility. And so that we can reap the rewards of the consequences from the healthy and positive decisions that we make. Okay, cool. I'm getting tired, but voluntary ignorance is next. Just to explain that voluntary ignorance is a thing, and even worse, voluntary ignorance degrades into learned helplessness. So at first it's like, oh, I didn't even know that I was actually doing that. Like it was a subconscious action that I was just a habit that I'm always doing, like a bad habit. We're voluntarily ignorant of bad habits a lot of times because they're just subconsciously ingrained into our automatic behavior. But what gets even worse than voluntary ignorance, it's helpful to shine the light on them and take responsibility over those choices, actually find the choice in it through our sovereign individual freedom and choose a better life. But if we don't, that voluntary ignorance, when we're just simply not aware of it, degrades into actually learned helplessness, where we actually believe, we're not just choosing to ignore, but we actually believe that we can't do anything about it. That is dangerous. Yeah. Like, if you believe you can't do anything about it, then you've closed your mind to any option or hope for your situation, your life to improve. And then it definitely will never improve, because there's not even an option to, and you believe that. The closing of the mind is just terrible. So it definitely leads to just someone else running your life for you, someone else who understands these things. And that's just a pretty shitty quality of life. All right? So that's the solution, and then some surrounding pieces to really help power you through the solution with a clear plan for efficiency to execute it, carried through a strong ownership of responsibility for just exactly what you're doing during the solution. There is a final little wrap-up chapter about preparing for pitfalls that we often run into when we start executing our solution. When we start executing our solution, we run into issues like our minds start barking at us with automatic complaints, unhelpful criticism, and then again, next, it's also just really hard and uncomfortable to do these types of things. And so we have to understand that discomfort is change. And so we have to look at discomfort and uncomfortableness differently as the actual action of adaptation, like the actual habituation process, exposing ourselves to the anxiety and the discomfort that we've been avoiding, or whatever, that the discomfort that is necessary in order to change. Because discomfort is necessary. It's not only necessary to change, discomfort is change. Cool. So we must take responsibility for the necessary discomfort. We can't just be like, oh, I'm going to start this and I'm just going to start running a marathon. It's going to be great. It's not going to be great. It's going to feel terrible. It's going to be awful. An awful experience. Learning things, hitting the grindstone. This is tough shit. So we must plan ahead and understand there's going to be a level of necessary discomfort as a part of the solution. So we can't let unhelpful criticism tear us down, and we have to know why we're doing it. We have to have a clear understanding of why. With that said, nothing left but to do it. We're at 48 minutes now. That's it. All the details of each section that I've been talking about, each component of this whole plan and this whole explanation that I've been talking about, is in a specific chapter of the Hardmode House, and it's explained in more like fluent details and elegance or whatever, if you prefer like the long form version. So thank you and good night. Just kidding. All right, take care.